Hey there, welcome to the second episode of Rhino for Absolute Beginners. I'm Hossein, and together we're going to learn step by step how to work with digital design logic and the Rhino software environment. So, in the first episode, we kind of got our feet wet, right? We explored the philosophy of digital design and the overall vibe of Rhino. Now, in this episode, we're diving into precise and principled drawing. You know, the place where the foundation of shape modeling really takes shape. All the commands for this part are laid out on the video timeline, so whenever you're ready, you can just jump straight to your desired command and focus on that specific section. And hey, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of the upcoming episodes in this awesome series. Let's get into the training. We're talking about the toolbar, or like the toolbar in Rhino. This section is packed with these icons, right? Super useful commands that you can just click on to access them instantly. But here's the kicker. Next to a bunch of these icons, there's this tiny little arrow, like a cascade thing, you know? If you hold down that, click on the icon, boom, the full menu of that family of commands pops up. So take the line command, for example. When you click on that little arrow, it's like, whoa, all these options show up. Line from midpoint, line from curve, and like so many more. It's pretty wild. So the beauty of it is you don't have to memorize every single command. Just know where to find the source for each group. Okay, so like let's talk about point cascades, right? This is all about the different ways you can like draw a point, you know? So first up, we've got this thing called single point. It's super simple. The point command, it just draws a single point object at a specific location. So like, here's what you do. You just pick a location for that point object. Easy peasy. All right, so let's break this down, yeah? Multi-point, right? So the points command, it draws like multiple point objects. Super simple. You just pick the locations for these point objects and then boom, you press enter. Easy peasy. Now, moving on to the next part, extract point. This is where it gets really interesting. The extract point command, it actually places point objects at curve control points or like edit point locations. Oh, and let's not forget about surface and text control point locations too. So what you do, you just select your curves, surfaces, or polygon mesh objects. And guess what? Rhino creates point objects for every control point in the object. Okay, so like there are so many advanced commands, right? And if I were to cover all of them in this video, we'd be talking like hours and hours, you know? So honestly, why don't you just go ahead and test them out yourself? And I'll totally try to make a separate video for those advanced commands that are really useful, you know, like with all these cool cascades and everything. All right, so let's talk about this line cascades thing, right? So like this is all about drawing lines and line segments, which is kind of neat. So the first command, it's called single line. Basically, it lets you draw one line segment. Pretty straightforward, huh? So here's what you got to do. Step one, you pick where you want to start the line, like just point to it, you know? And then step two, you pick where you want to end it. Easy peasy. Oh, and don't forget to use object snaps. That's super helpful for referencing existing geometry. Like it just makes everything so much smoother. The Polyline command, it's pretty neat. It's all about drawing a series of connected line or arc segments. So check it out. To actually draw a polyline, here's what you do. First, you pick the start of that first segment, right? Then you just pick the end of that first segment. And guess what? That's also the start of your next segment. Then you pick the end of the next segment and you just keep going, picking until your polyline is all done. And when you're ready, just hit enter. Super simple. Now, about that line from midpoint, oh man, this is cool too. You can literally draw a new line or object right from the midpoint of something. So you just execute it like this. Line plat from midpoint, then select your object and choose your second point for the line. Easy peasy. Okay, so like there are so many little instructions and details, right? And like when you try each one, you're totally going to be surprised. I mean, can you imagine? It's just, wow. Each one is a new experience waiting for you. All right, so let's dive into this, right? Cascade curves. So like this is all about the different ways we can, draw lines and curves, which is super fascinating. And then we have the control point curves, which is like totally cool because the curve command helps you create this curve from, specific control points. So here's how it goes. First, you pick the start of the curve, right? Then you just like choose the next points along the way. And when you're ready, you simply press enter to finish it up. It's so simple. Oh, and get this. The curve command makes a curve with a degree that's one less than the number of points you picked, as long as the control points are like equal to or less than the degree setting. When you want to interpolate point curves, right, this command, it's all about drawing a curve through like those selected locations in space, And oh man, many CAD programs, they use this term spline for these interpolated curves. How cool is that? So here's what you do. First, you pick the start of the curve, right? Then you go ahead and pick the next points. And here's the kicker, you just press enter to end the curve. Pretty straightforward, huh? Now, if we're talking about interpolating points on a surface, it's kind of similar. This command draws a curve through like selected locations on a surface. So first you select a surface, right? And if you want the infinite plane, just type IP for those options. Super handy. Then you pick the start of the curve again, and you keep picking those next points. And don't forget to press enter. All right, so check this out. Tween between two curves, right? So the tween curves command, it like creates these curves between two input curves, whether they're open or closed. So here's what you do. 1, first, you select the first curve. 2, then you go ahead and select the second curve. Now, if you need to adjust the curve, no biggie. Just click on a curve endpoint to change the direction. And get this, every time you click that endpoint, you get a preview of the curves changing. How cool is that? Now, let's talk about the spiral. The spiral command, it draws a spiral curve. So here's how you do it. 1, first, you pick the start of the spiral axis. This is like the imaginary line around which the spiral will wind. 2, then you pick the end of the spiral axis. 3, after that, you choose the first radius and start point of the spiral. 4, and finally, you pick the second radius at the end of the spiral. Oh, hey, so like, let me tell you about this helix command, right? It's all about drawing this super cool helical curve. So first things first, you got to pick where the start of the axis is, Then you totally pick the end of the axis too, which is like just as important. And then, you have to specify a radius value. Like, that's key. Okay, so let's like break this down, right? We're going to do a little practical example for this command. So imagine we want to model a phone wire. Okay, super simple. Just grab that control point curve and draw a nice freeform curve. Yeah? Then you click on it and start moving those control points around with the gumball tool to really get it looking good. Now, here's where it gets interesting. I'm going to hit the helix command, but instead of drawing a path, I'm going to choose the around curve option. This way, the helix is created around the linear path I gave it. Isn't that clever? Then I just set the radii and finalize those helix settings, and bam, we're done. Oh, and guess what? I can even turn this into a pipe to give it a nicer appearance. How cool is that? Don't worry, I'll explain the pipe part later. Okay, so like, we're talking about circles here, right? So the circle command, it's all about drawing a circle from a center location and a radius. I mean, it sounds simple enough, but it's pretty cool, So here are the steps, right? First off, you pick the center location, like where do you want it to be? Then you pick a radius location, or you can totally specify an option. Easy peasy. Now the diameter command, it's kind of like the previous one, but instead of using the radius, you're specifying the diameter of the circle. Can you believe it? And then there's the 3-point command, which draws a circle through 3 points on the circumference. So for the steps, you just pick 3 points that define the circumference. It's all about precision, right? All right, so like here's the thing, right? When you're around a curve, you you draw this circle, right? But it's not just any circle, it's like perpendicular to the curve, which is pretty neat. So you just pick a curve, yeah? And then you got to like choose where the center of that circle is on the curve and then, decide on a radius or a diameter. All right, so let's talk about the ellipses, right? So this is all about drawing a closed elliptical curve, which is super interesting. Okay, so here are the steps. You ready? First, you pick the center. Easy enough, right? Then you got to pick the end of the first axis. And finally, you pick the end of the second axis. Now, moving on to the diameter part, which, oh man, this is where it gets a bit more technical, but still totally manageable. So this one draws the ellipse from points on its axes. So step one, you pick the start of the first axis. Then you pick the end of that first axis. And lastly, you pick the end of the second axis. All right, so let's dive into this whole ellipse thing, yeah? So first up, we've got this method called from foci, right? And it's super simple. Okay, so check it out. 1, you just pick the first focus, just grab it, yeah? 2, then you go ahead and pick the second focus, super straightforward, right? 3, and lastly, you just need to pick a point on that ellipse curve. Easy peasy. Now, moving on to drawing the ellipse around a curve, which honestly sounds kind of fancy. Here's what you do. 1, first, you pick the center on the curve. Got it? 2, next, you pick the end of the first axis, which is like essential, right? 3, and then you grab the end of the second axis. Boom, you've got your ellipse. All right, so by corner, you want to draw this ellipse from the corners of like an enclosing rectangle. So first off, you got to pick a corner, any corner for the rectangle, Then you take the opposite corner of that same rectangle. It's super simple, but kind of cool, right? Like you're literally just connecting those dots. All right, so let's talk about these arc cascades, yeah? So this cascade is all about like the different ways you can draw various arcs, right? Okay, so first up, we've got the center, start, angle thing. The arc command, it's like super handy. It lets you draw an arc with options for a center location. That's point 1. Then you've got one endpoint, which is point 2. And then you either pick a second endpoint or you can just type in an angle. How cool is that? Now let's break down the center steps, yeah? 1, first, you want to pick the center of the arc's radius, right? 2, you pick the arc's first endpoint. 3, finally, you either pick the arc's second endpoint or you can just type in an angle if that's easier for you. So yeah, it's all about getting those points just right. All right, so here we go, right? We're talking about starting and ending points on an arc, yeah? So first off, you got to draw this arc starting from the first end. It's super simple. Okay, so for the start point steps, it's just 3 little things, right? 1, first, pick the arc's start point. 2, then you pick the arc's end point. 3, finally, just click a location that the arc passes through. Now, for the second part, where you specify the direction at the start, it's pretty neat. 1, you start by picking a start point. 2, next, choose the direction that the arc will be tangent to at that start point. 3, and then just pick an endpoint. And here's the cool part. As you're moving the cursor around, a center point for the arc just pops up as a reference. Okay, so we're talking about rectangles here, right? So this is all about different methods for drawing squares and rectangles, So first off, there's this thing called corner to corner. Basically, you just use 2 opposite corners to create a closed rectangular polyline. Super simple, yeah? You just pick your 2 points, boom. That's your rectangle. And then, there's this other method, center corner. So you start from the center point and then head out to a corner. Okay, so here's the deal, right? You've got these 3 points and they're super important, really crucial. So you draw this rectangle, right? Using 2 corners that are right next to each other. And then there's this point on the opposite side. Now let's talk about this rounded rectangle thing. Oh man, it's so interesting. So you can round the corners like with arcs or conic sections, which is like so fancy, you know? And then you just like pick the radius for those rounded corners. It's kind of like, all right, so check this out. We're talking about Polygon Cascades. This whole thing is about different ways to draw all kinds of polygons. Super interesting stuff. So the polygon command, oh man, it's where you like create this closed polyline and it totally has a specific number of sides, which is like super neat. Okay, here's how you do it. You just follow the prompts for whatever option you pick. But like if you don't pick anything, no worries, there's a default option just waiting for you. All right, so like let's talk about this circumscribed polygon thing, yeah? So imagine this, right? You've got this polygon and it's like the midpoints of the sides, they totally touch this imaginary circle, like with a specific radius, you know? Okay, so first thing, you pick the center, right? Just like right there in the middle. And then you got to find the midpoint of the polygon edge, like just chilling there. Now, moving on to this edge thing, it's pretty neat. You can draw a polygon just by defining one edge. So, edge steps, yeah? First, you pick the start of the edge, super important, okay? And then you go ahead and pick the end of the edge. All right, so check it out. We're going to draw a star-shaped polygon, right? So like first things first, you got to pick the center. Like that's step one, yeah? Then for step two, you just go ahead and pick a corner. Super simple, right? And then, oh wait, here's the fun part. For step three, you got to pick the radius for the imaginary circle that's going to define the second star radius. All right, so like let's dive into this curve tool cascades thing. So this cascade, right? It's all about those different methods for editing lines and curves. How neat is that? Now, let's talk about the fillet command. This little gem adds a tangent arc between two curves, and it's all about trimming or extending those curves to fit the arc just right. So like, here's what you do. Step one, you select the first curve, near the end. Then step two, you pick the second curve, also near the end. Super simple. All right, so the chamfer command, right? It creates this line segment between two curves and like it trims or extends those curves so they meet the line segment. So here are the steps, just to make it super clear. One, you select the first curve, like near the end for the chamfer. Two, then you select the second curve, again, near the end for the chamfer. And oh man, there are so many advanced commands out there. If I were to go over all of them in this video, it would literally take like hours. So you should definitely check them out yourself. I'll try to make a separate video for those advanced commands because they're really useful. For now though, let's just focus on these two commands from this cascade, all right? Okay, so like let's talk about these transform commands, right? This group is all about moving, rotating, scaling, and copying objects, So first up, we've got move. The move command options are like super important because they control how you use the mouse for selecting and dragging stuff around. It's all in the details, right? So here are the steps, yeah? Step one, select your objects. Easy peasy, right? Step two, you got to pick a point to move from. And get this, you can just press enter to use the bounding box center of the object. How cool is that? Then step three, you pick a point to move to. All right, so the copy command, right? It like totally makes duplicates of whatever objects you've selected. Super simple. So first off, you want to select those objects. Oh, and if they're in a group, a new group pops up just for your copied objects. Pretty neat, huh? But like they don't get added to the original group. So keep that in mind. Next step, you got to pick a point to copy from. You can just press enter and it'll use the bounding box center of your object. So convenient. Then you pick a point to copy to for each copy you want to make. Easy peasy. And when you're all done, just press enter again to end the command. All right, so let's talk about this mirror command, yeah? It's like super cool. So first things first, you got to like select the objects you want to mirror, right? Easy peasy. Then, here's the fun part. You pick the start of the mirror plane. Like, where do you want it to begin? And then you pick the end of the mirror plane. It's all about that perfect alignment, you know? As you're like moving the cursor around, Rhino's going to give you this nifty preview of where those mirrored objects are going to land. The two endpoints you choose, they actually define a mirror plane that's like perpendicular to the construction plane. Oh, and don't forget to use those object snaps to place the mirror plane accurately, especially if you want to like join a surface with its mirrored copy. Trust me, it makes everything look so much cleaner. All right, so here we go with the rotate command, right? It's all about like rotating objects around this axis that's, you know, totally perpendicular to the construction plane you're working with. The whole rotation plane thing, it's based on a picked point and the construction plane of your active viewport. Like, how neat is that? So check it out. Here are the steps you got to follow. 1, first, you select the objects. Super easy, right? 2, next, you pick the center of rotation. Just like find that sweet spot. 3, and then you either type the angle or like pick 2 reference points. It's all about getting that perfect spin. All right, so let me break this down for you. The scale 1D command, right? It's all about changing the size of those selected objects, but just in one direction. So here's what you do. First, you got to select the objects you want to work with, you know? Then you pick a base point, or hey, just press enter if you want to use the center of the bounding box for all those selected objects as your base point. Simple enough, right? Next, you type in the scale factor and a direction, or you can just pick 2 reference points. Oh, and get this, if you type 0 for the scale factor, it totally flattens the object in the direction you picked, right? The cool thing is, those objects will expand or contract just in that single direction you specified, without messing with the other directions. All right, so here we go, like scale 2D, right? This command, it totally changes the size of your selected objects, like uniformly in 2 directions. So first up, you got to select those objects, you know? And then you pick a base point, or like if you're feeling chill, just hit enter, and it'll use the center of the bounding box for all those selected things as your base point. Then you type in the scale factor, or dude, you can totally just pick 2 reference points. And here's the cool part. The objects will expand or like contract uniformly in those 2 directions on the axes of your active viewport construction plane. So wherever you specify that scale factor, that's where the magic happens. Oh, and here's a little tip. When you're scaling by dragging, that scale factor becomes the default the next time you roll with the scale 2D command. How wild is that? Okay, so like let's talk about the scale command, right? It's all about like changing the size of your selected objects, but like uniformly, you know, in the X, Y, and Z directions. How cool is that? So first up, you've got to select your objects, right? Super important. Then you pick a base point, or like if you're feeling chill, just press enter, and it'll use the center of the bounding box of all your selected objects. Easy peasy. And then, oh, here's the fun part. You can type in the scale factor or like pick 2 reference points. It's just like so versatile. Isn't that amazing? All right, so like let's talk about the array command, yeah? It's super interesting. So it copies these objects, right? They're spaced out in like columns, rows, and even levels, which is super handy. And it does this in the X, Y, and Z directions. Okay, so here's how you do it, step by step. First, you want to like select the objects you're working with. The array directions are all about the X, Y, and Z on your active construction plane, which is like really important. Then you just type in how many copies you want in the X direction. Don't forget to hit enter, okay? And like you can type in 1 or more for the number of copies, totally your choice. Next, you do the same for the Y direction and then like finish it off with the Z direction. Super straightforward, right? Now, here's the fun part. You get to pick the corners of a rectangle that'll define your unit cell, which is all about the X and Y spacing distance. All right, so the array polar command, right? It's like super interesting. So first, you got to like select the objects you want to copy, yeah? Then you pick the center of the array, which is kind of crucial, you know? Now, the rotation axis for this polar array, it's like all about the z direction of your active construction plane at that point you chose. Pretty neat, huh? Then you just type the number of items you want and hit enter, easy peasy. But wait, hold up. You need to enter a value of 2 or more, all right? And then type the angle to fill. So what happens next? Oh, copies of those selected objects pop up, all rotated around that axis you defined by your center point. All right, so here's the deal with the array curve thing. You know, it's pretty neat. So first up, you got to select the objects you want to array, right? Easy enough. Then you pick a path curve, like close to the end where you want the array to kick off. Or you could totally go for the base point option if that works better for you. Next, you've got to decide how many elements you want to array, or like the spacing distance along that curve. It's super flexible. All right, so like when it comes to editing and modifying commands, you know, we've got some pretty neat tools. First up, there's the trim command. So this one, it's all about cutting and deleting those selected bits of an object where it meets another object. Pretty cool, right? So here's how it goes. Step 1, you got to select those cutting objects. If you want the cutting objects to be trimmed too, just pre-select everything before you kick off the command. Simple enough. Then you select the parts you want to trim away, either from the other objects or the cutting ones themselves. You can even like shift plus click near a curve end to extend that curve right to the cutting objects. Neat trick, huh? Divides objects into parts using other objects as cutters, you know? So first things first, you got to select those objects. You can totally pick multiple objects to split with like multiple cutters. Isn't that neat? Then you've got to choose your cutting objects. And if you need to deselect those cutting objects, just hit Control, like super easy. And then to wrap it all up, just press Enter to finish the command. So, okay, let's break this down, right? The explode command, it's like, whoa, it just takes those objects and like breaks them into their components, you know? So first step, you got to select those objects. Easy peasy, right? And then, here's the join command. It's super fascinating because it connects objects together, like forming a single entity. I mean, it turns lines into polylines, curves into polycurves. Like, how cool is that? Oh, and surfaces and polysurfaces, they just merge into solids. So if you're working with curves, surfaces, polysurfaces, extrusions, meshes, or even sub D, just select those objects you want to join. Let's break this down, yeah? So like the group command, right? It's all about taking those selected objects and like turning them into this one like cool named unit. Super neat, right? And then on the flip side, you've got the ungroup command, which is like just the opposite. It totally strips away that group status from like a selected group. All right, so in this episode, we totally got to know a bunch of basic Rhino commands, right? I mean, from drawing points and lines to creating curves, circles, ellipses, arcs, and polygons. It's just wild. And then we learned how to use the transform commands to move, rotate, scale, and repeat objects. And finally, we got into the editing tools like trim, split, and join. Honestly, this part is like the backbone of precise modeling in Rhino. I seriously recommend you try out all the different commands in each cascade so that over time, the logic of working with these tools becomes second nature to you. In the next episode, we're diving into creating 3D forms and transforming lines into volumes. That's where the real design magic begins. This foundational mindset is step 1 for complex and parametric modeling. So if you're really into continuing this educational journey, you know what to do. Just hit that subscribe button for the channel and give this video a thumbs up. It really helps out. All right, until the next video, take care.